The dust swirled in violent clouds as the stagecoach rolled to a stop in front of Yreka's lone hotel, the wooden wheels creaking in protest against the parched California earth. Amelia Lockhart clutched her reticule tightly against her chest, her knuckles white with tension as she surveyed what would become her new home, a dusty mining town nestled in the shadow of the Klamath Mountains in Northern California. The year was 1875, and for Amelia, it marked both an end and a beginning. "Last stop, Yreka," the driver called out, his voice gruff from years of shouting over the rumble of hooves and wheels. Amelia hesitated before stepping down from the coach. At 24, she had never imagined herself fleeing across the country to a place where no one knew her name or the tragedy that had sent her running. Boston, with its cobblestone streets and society balls, felt like another lifetime now, a lifetime she desperately needed to forget. "Need a hand, miss?" the driver asked, extending a weathered palm toward her. "Thank you," she replied, accepting his assistance as she descended to the ground, her boots landing in the thick dust. Her traveling dress, once a fashionable blue, now bore the stains of a week's hard journey. The summer heat pressed down on her shoulders, and she lifted a hand to adjust her bonnet, shielding her eyes from the relentless California sun. The driver unloaded her trunk and carpetbag, placing them beside her on the boardwalk. "The Gold Rush Inn is right there," he said, nodding toward the two-story building. "Best accommodations in town, though that ain't saying much." Amelia thanked him again, pressing a coin into his palm before turning toward the hotel. Her uncle's letter had promised a teaching position and a fresh start, away from the whispers and pitying glances that had followed her through Boston's streets after Edward's death. The memory of her fiancé's face, pale and lifeless in his casket, threatened to overwhelm her, but she pushed it away. She had traveled 2,000 miles to escape those memories. She would not surrender to them now, not when she had finally reached her destination. As she reached for the handle of her trunk, a deep voice came from behind her. "Let me help you with that, madam." Amelia turned to find herself face to face with a tall man in a worn leather vest, dusty denim pants, and a Stetson hat pulled low over his eyes. When he tipped his hat back, she was struck by the intensity of his gaze, eyes the color of a summer storm, gray with hints of blue around the edges. "I can manage, thank you," she said, her voice carrying the refined accent of her Boston upbringing. He raised an eyebrow, amusement playing at the corners of his mouth. "I don't doubt your capabilities, madam, but that trunk looks heavy enough to break the back of a mule." Before she could protest further, he hefted the trunk with surprising ease. "Zachary Irwin," he said, introducing himself with a nod. "Most folks just call me Zach." "Amelia Lockhart," she replied stiffly, picking up her carpetbag. "I appreciate the assistance, Mr. Irwin, though it wasn't necessary. New to Yreka, I take it?" he asked, following her toward the hotel entrance. "Is it that obvious?" she asked, unable to keep the weariness from her voice. "Let's just say you don't exactly blend in," he replied, his eyes taking in her travel-worn but clearly expensive dress and carefully arranged hair. "You're looking at the town like you can't decide whether to stay or hop back on that coach." The accuracy of his observation unsettled her. "I'm here to teach," she said simply. "My uncle, Benjamin White, arranged a position for me at the school." Recognition dawned in Zachary's eyes. "You're Ben's niece. He mentioned you were coming, said you were from back east somewhere." "Boston," she supplied, then immediately wished she hadn't. The less she spoke of home, the better. They entered the hotel lobby, a modest space with faded wallpaper and a worn counter. The proprietor, a stout woman with graying hair pinned severely atop her head, looked up from her ledger. "Good afternoon," Amelia greeted her. I'm Amelia Lockhart. My uncle should have arranged a room for me. The woman nodded. Been expecting you, Miss Lockhart. I'm Mrs. Pennyworth. Your uncle came by yesterday to make sure everything was ready. She slid a key across the counter. Room 4, top of the stairs, first door on the right, has a nice view of the street, such as it is. Zachary carried her trunk up the narrow staircase, setting it down inside her room with care. The space was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a small writing desk beneath the window. "Thank you for your help, Mr. Irwin," Amelia said, standing awkwardly in the doorway, unsure of the proper protocol for such situations in this unfamiliar territory. "Just Zach," he corrected her with an easy smile. "And it was no trouble at all. I own the livery stable down the street. If you need a horse or a ride somewhere, you come find me." "I don't ride," she said quickly, then regretted her sharp tone. "That is, I haven't had much occasion for it in Boston." "Well, you're in California now, Miss Lockhart," he said, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Out here, knowing how to ride is about as necessary as knowing how to breathe." He tipped his hat and turned to leave. "Welcome to Yreka. I reckon we'll be seeing more of each other." As his footsteps receded down the hall, Amelia closed the door and leaned against it, suddenly overwhelmed by the enormity of what she had done. She had traveled across the country, leaving behind everything familiar, to start anew in a dusty mining town where she knew no one but her uncle, whom she hadn't seen since childhood. Drawing a deep breath, she moved to the window and pushed aside the thin curtain. Below, the main street of Yreka stretched before her, lined with wooden buildings and populated by a mixture of miners, merchants, and townspeople going about their business. In the distance, the mountains rose majestically against the sky, indifferent to the human struggles playing out beneath them. This was her life now, a new beginning, a chance to forget. But as she watched Zachary Irwin cross the street toward the livery stable, his confident stride and broad shoulders unmistakable even from a distance, a flicker of something unexpected stirred within her, something that felt dangerously like curiosity. Amelia quickly dropped the curtain. She had not come to the West to find a new romance. She had come to forget an old one, and she would do well to remember that. The following morning, Amelia awoke to the sounds of a town coming to life. Wagon wheels creaked, shopkeepers called out greetings, and somewhere nearby, a blacksmith's hammer rang against an anvil with rhythmic precision. After dressing in one of her simpler dresses, a modest brown cotton with a white collar, she ventured downstairs, intending to locate her uncle's house before her meeting with the school board that afternoon. Mrs. Pennyworth was arranging fresh flowers in a vase at the front desk and looked up as Amelia descended the stairs. "Good morning, Miss Lockhart. Did you sleep well?" "As well as could be expected after such a long journey," Amelia replied politely. "Could you direct me to my uncle's residence?" "I believe it's somewhere near the church." "Indeed it is. Benjamin White's place is the white house with the blue trim just past the Methodist church on Minor Street. Can't miss it." Mrs. Pennyworth tilted her head. "Would you care for some breakfast before you go? My husband makes a fine flapjack." "Thank you, but I'll eat with my uncle," Amelia said, eager to reconnect with her only family in this unfamiliar place. The morning air was cool but promised another warm day as Amelia made her way down Minor Street. Yreka was larger than she had initially thought, with several cross streets and a surprising number of businesses for a town so far removed from civilization, as she knew it. She passed a general store, a millinery shop, a bank, and several saloons before reaching the modest white church with its small steeple. Just beyond, as Mrs. Pennyworth had described, stood a neatly kept house with blue trim and a small garden out front. Amelia smoothed her skirts and adjusted her bonnet, before knocking on the front door. The door swung open to reveal a man in his early 50s with a salt and pepper beard and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners her mother's eyes. Amelia realized with a pang. It had been 15 years since she'd seen her uncle at her mother's funeral when Amelia was just 9 years old. "Uncle Benjamin," she said, suddenly feeling like that 9-year-old girl again. "Amelia," he breathed, his face breaking into a wide smile. "My word, look at you. The spitting image of your mother." He opened his arms, and Amelia stepped into his embrace, finding comfort in the familiar scent of pipe tobacco that clung to his clothes. Come in," he urged, ushering her inside. "My housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, has prepared a feast in your honor. I've been telling her for weeks about my niece from Boston coming to teach our unruly Western children." The interior of the house was comfortable and well-appointed, reflecting Benjamin White's status as Yreka's town doctor. Bookshelves lined the walls of the parlor, and medical journals were stacked neatly on side tables. The smell of coffee and baking bread wafted from the kitchen. "Your journey was safe, I trust?" Uncle Benjamin asked as he guided her to the dining room, where a small Chinese woman was setting out plates of eggs, bacon, and freshly baked bread. "Yes, though quite exhausting," Amelia replied, taking a seat at the table. "Thank you for arranging everything, Uncle. I don't know what I would have done otherwise." His expression softened. "Your father's letter explained enough. I'm sorry about your fiancé, Amelia." "Edward, was it?" Amelia nodded, not trusting herself to speak. The mere mention of Edward's name still had the power to constrict her throat with grief. Understanding her silence, Uncle Benjamin changed the subject. "The school board is eager to meet you. We haven't had a proper teacher since Miss Garrison married the banker and moved to Sacramento last spring. The children have been making do with the preacher's wife, but she's expecting a baby any day now." "I hope I can meet their expectations," Amelia said, accepting a cup of coffee from Mrs. Chen with a grateful smile. "You'll exceed them," her uncle assured her. "A Boston education counts for a lot out here. Though I should warn you, Western children are different from what you might be accustomed to. Many of them help their families with farming or mining when they're not in school. They're practical-minded, not always concerned with Latin declensions or European history." "I'll adapt my teaching accordingly," Amelia promised, sampling the delicious breakfast. After the bland fare of stagecoach stops and train dining cars, the meal was a welcome change. Their conversation turned to Family Matters news of her father, who had remained in Boston, and reminiscences about her mother, Uncle Benjamin's younger sister. It was pleasant and comfortable, exactly what Amelia needed after her long journey. After breakfast, Uncle Benjamin insisted on showing her around town before her meeting with the school board. They walked arm in arm down the main street, and he pointed out the important landmarks: the courthouse, the newspaper office, the doctor's surgery where he practiced, and finally, the schoolhouse, a modest wooden building at the edge of town with a small bell tower on top. "It's not what you're used to, I'm sure," he said apologetically. "It's perfect," Amelia replied, and meant it. The simplicity of the building, with its rows of windows and sturdy construction, appealed to her practical nature. Here, perhaps, she could focus on shaping young minds rather than dwelling on her own heartache. As they turned to head back toward the center of town, the sound of hoofbeats drew their attention. Zachary Irwin approached on a magnificent black stallion, leading a second horse, a gentle-looking chestnut mare. "Good day, Doc," he called out, tipping his hat to Benjamin before his gaze settled on Amelia. "Miss Lockhart, settling in well?" "Mr. Irwin was kind enough to help with my trunk yesterday," Amelia explained to her uncle. Zach's one of our most respected citizens, Uncle Benjamin said. Runs the finest livery stable this side of Sacramento and breeds the best horses in Siskiyou County. You flatter me, Doc, Zachary said with a modest smile, though Amelia noted the pride in his eyes at the mention of his horses. I was just heading out to check on the Anderson place. Their mare's about to foal, and old man Anderson's worried. Mr. Irwin is also our unofficial veterinarian, Uncle Benjamin added with a chuckle. Knows more about horse ailments than I do about human ones, I sometimes think. Only because I've had more practice, Zachary replied good-naturedly. Speaking of practice, Miss Lockhart, I recall you mentioning you don't ride. That's something of a handicap out here. Amelia felt herself stiffen. I'm sure I'll manage, Mr. Irwin. I've no doubt, he said, his eyes twinkling with that same amusement she'd noticed the day before. But if you change your mind, this gentle lady here, he patted the chestnut mare's neck, would be perfect for a beginner. Her name's Penny, and she's as patient as a saint. My niece will be occupied with teaching duties, Uncle Benjamin interjected, seeming to sense Amelia's discomfort. Though I suppose the ability to ride would be useful for visiting students who live outside town. Zachary nodded. The offer stands. Anytime you'd like to learn, Miss Lockhart, you just come by the livery. With another tip of his hat, he continued on his way, leading the chestnut mare behind his stallion. He seems confident, Amelia observed once Zachary was out of earshot. Uncle Benjamin laughed. Zach Irwin has earned the right to be confident. Came here with nothing 10 years ago and built that livery from the ground up. Now he owns half the grazing land east of town and supplies horses to stages and freight companies all the way to Oregon. He gave her a sideways glance. He's a good man, Amelia. Solid. Not the type you might be used to from Boston society, but out here, a man's worth is measured by his actions, not his pedigree. I didn't come west looking for a husband, Uncle, Amelia said firmly. I came to teach and to. She trailed off, to forget, her uncle finished softly. I understand, my dear, but remember life has a way of continuing, even when we think it cannot possibly do so. Amelia had no response to that. Instead, she changed the subject, asking about the schoolhouse and the curriculum she would be expected to teach. As they walked back toward town, she tried to focus on her uncle's words, but found her thoughts drifting inexplicably to a pair of storm-gray eyes and the offer of a gentle chestnut mare named Penny. The meeting with the school board that afternoon went better than Amelia had anticipated. The board consisted of 5 members. The town mayor, a portly man named William Perkins, the Methodist minister, Reverend Thomas Hayes, the owner of the general store, Harold Jenkins, the bank manager, George Sullivan, and surprisingly, the only woman on the board, Mrs. Eleanor Whitaker, who owned the town's millinery shop. They were clearly impressed by Amelia's education and teaching experience at a girls' academy in Boston, though she carefully avoided mentioning that she had left that position abruptly following Edward's death, when the sympathetic glances and whispered conversations had become unbearable. We have 27 children enrolled at present, Mayor Perkins informed her, consulting a sheet of paper. Ages 5 to 16, though the older boys often miss school during planting and harvest seasons, or when the mines need extra hands. The previous teacher, Miss Garrison, divided them into 3 groups based on age and ability, Reverend Hayes added. We found that system worked quite well. Amelia nodded, mentally calculating how to manage such diverse age groups in a single classroom. I'll need to assess their current knowledge levels, of course, but that arrangement seems sensible. Mrs. Whitaker leaned forward, her sharp eyes appraising Amelia. We've ordered new textbooks from San Francisco, but they won't arrive for another month. Until then, you'll need to make do with what we have. I brought some books with me, Amelia said, and I'm accustomed to improvising when necessary. Term begins next Monday, the bank manager, Mr. Sullivan, stated. Will that give you sufficient time to prepare? Yes, that should be fine, Amelia assured them, though inwardly she felt a flutter of anxiety. 6 days to prepare lessons for 27 children of varying ages and abilities was a daunting prospect, but she was determined to prove herself equal to the task. After a few more questions about her teaching philosophy and discipline methods, the board voted unanimously to hire her, with a salary of $40 per month, less than half what she had earned in Boston, but sufficient for her needs in Yreka, where the cost of living was considerably lower. "Welcome to our community, Miss Lockhart," Mayor Perkins said, shaking her hand. "We're fortunate to have someone of your caliber teaching our children." As the meeting concluded and Amelia prepared to leave, Mrs. Whittaker approached her. "I hope you'll join us for the Ladies' Aid Society meeting on Thursday afternoon," she said. "It would be a good opportunity for you to meet some of the mothers of your future pupils." "Thank you, I'd be delighted," Amelia replied, grateful for the invitation. Making connections in the community would be essential for her success as a teacher. She left the town hall feeling a mixture of excitement and trepidation. The reality of her new life was beginning to take shape, and while the challenge ahead was considerable, it offered exactly what she needed: a purpose to fill her days and, hopefully, to crowd out the memories that still haunted her nights. As she walked back toward the hotel, planning to collect her belongings and move to her uncle's house where she would be staying until more permanent accommodations could be arranged, Amelia found herself passing the livery stable. Before she could reconsider, her feet carried her toward the open doors of the barn. The interior was cool and dim after the bright sunshine, and it took a moment for her eyes to adjust. The familiar smells of hay, leather, and horses filled the air, reminiscent of the carriage houses in Boston, yet somehow more earthy and immediate. "Miss Lockhart," Zachary's voice came from one of the stalls. "This is an unexpected pleasure." He emerged, wiping his hands on a rag. He had removed his hat and vest in the heat, and his white shirt, open at the collar, revealed a strong neck tanned by the sun. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, giving him a boyish appearance despite the maturity in his eyes. "I was passing by and thought I would inquire about riding lessons," Amelia said, surprising herself with the words. "As you pointed out, it's a necessary skill here, and as the teacher, I should be able to visit students who cannot make it to town regularly." A slow smile spread across Zachary's face. "A practical decision. I admire that. When would be a convenient time for you?" she asked, maintaining a businesslike tone despite the unfamiliar flutter in her stomach. "How about Saturday morning, say 8 o'clock? The day will still be cool and we'll have plenty of time for your first lesson before the heat sets in." Amelia nodded. "Saturday at 8 then. What are your fees, Mr. Irwin?" He waved a hand dismissively. "Let's see how you take to riding first. If you decide to continue, we can discuss compensation." "I insist on paying for your time, Mr. Irwin," Amelia said firmly. "Zach," he corrected her again. "And if you insist, we can arrange something, perhaps an exchange. I understand you're to be our new schoolteacher." "Yes, I start on Monday." "Well then, perhaps you could help me with some correspondence. I've a head for horses and business, but writing formal letters has never been my strong suit." Amelia considered the offer. It seemed a fair exchange, and there was something appealing about the idea of being useful beyond her teaching duties. "That seems equitable," she agreed. "Excellent," he smiled, and Amelia noticed a small dimple in his left cheek that appeared only when he was genuinely pleased. Saturday at 8, then. Wear something you don't mind getting dirty and boots if you have them. I'll be here, she promised, then turned to leave, conscious of having lingered longer than was perhaps proper for a new arrival in town who was still virtually a stranger. Miss Lockhart, Zachary called after her. When she turned back, his expression had softened. I heard about your loss. Your uncle mentioned it when he was arranging your arrival. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. The unexpected sympathy caught Amelia off guard. Thank you, she managed, her voice barely audible. The West can be a good place to heal, he added quietly. New beginnings and all that. Amelia nodded, not trusting herself to speak further. With a final glance at Zach, she stepped back into the sunlight, her heart beating a little faster than when she had entered. The days leading up to the start of school passed in a flurry of activity. Amelia spent hours at the schoolhouse, cleaning and organizing, examining the available textbooks, and preparing lessons for her diverse group of students. Mrs. Chen packed lunches for her each day, and Uncle Benjamin offered advice about the children and their families, providing valuable insights into the community she would be serving. Thursday afternoon brought the Ladies' Aid Society meeting, held in the church basement. Amelia wore one of her simpler dresses, not wanting to appear too fashionable or citified among the practical Western women. Mrs. Whittaker introduced her to the group, which included about 15 women of various ages. Ladies, this is Miss Amelia Lockhart, Dr. White's niece from Boston, who will be taking over as our schoolteacher, Mrs. Whittaker announced. The women greeted her warmly, though Amelia detected a note of curiosity and assessment in their eyes. She was, after all, not only a newcomer but an Easterner, and she sensed they were reserving full acceptance until they could determine whether she would adapt to their ways or attempt to impose her own. As they settled into their meeting, discussing plans for the Harvest Festival and a quilting project to benefit a family whose barn had recently burned down, Amelia found herself seated next to a young woman close to her own age. I'm Sarah Anderson, the woman introduced herself with a friendly smile. My husband and I have the farm east of town. Our son Billy will be in your class. He's 8 and full of mischief, so consider yourself warned. Thank you for the advance notice, Amelia replied, warming to Sarah's candid manner. I look forward to meeting him. Mr. Irwin was out at our place earlier this week, helping with our mare's foaling, Sarah continued. He mentioned he'd be teaching you to ride. Amelia felt a blush creep into her cheeks at the realization that her riding lessons were already a topic of conversation. Yes, I thought it would be a useful skill to acquire, given the distances some of the children travel to school. Sarah nodded approvingly. Very practical. And you couldn't ask for a better teacher than Zach Irwin. He's got a way with horses and people too. She lowered her voice conspiratorially. Half the unmarried ladies in town have set their caps for him, but he doesn't seem to notice. Too busy with that livery of his, I suppose. I'm not setting my cap for anyone, Amelia clarified quickly. I'm here to teach, not to find a husband. Sarah's eyes widened slightly. Of course not. I didn't mean to imply. It's just that Zach doesn't usually offer riding lessons, so when he mentioned it, I thought perhaps. It was a practical arrangement, Amelia insisted, perhaps too firmly. Nothing more. Sarah seemed about to say something else, but was interrupted by Mrs. Whittaker calling the meeting back to order. For the rest of the afternoon, Amelia participated in the society's discussions and activities, gradually feeling more at ease among the women of Yreka. By the time the meeting concluded, she had received invitations to dinner from 3 different families and promises from several mothers to ensure their children arrived promptly on the first day of school with all necessary supplies. As she walked home with Uncle Benjamin that evening, Amelia reflected on how different this close-knit community was from the more formal social circles of Boston. Here, a person's worth seemed to be measured by their willingness to work hard and help their neighbors, rather than by their family name or social connections. "You seem pensive," her uncle observed as they approached his house. "I was just thinking about how different life is here," Amelia admitted. "It's more immediate somehow, less concerned with appearances." Uncle Benjamin chuckled. "That's one way to put it, though don't be fooled, this town has its share of gossip and social maneuvering. It's just conducted over quilting frames instead of tea tables." "I noticed," Amelia said wryly. "Apparently, my riding lessons with Mr. Irwin are already common knowledge." "Ah, yes." Her uncle's expression grew thoughtful. "You should know that Zach's something of a catch in these parts. A successful business owner, respected community member, and," he hesitated, "unmarried. People will talk, Amelia. It's the way of small towns." "Let them talk," she said with more bravado than she felt. "I'm not interested in marriage, not after." She trailed off, the familiar pain catching in her throat. Uncle Benjamin squeezed her arm gently. "I understand, my dear. Just be prepared for the speculation. And remember, not everyone will know about your loss. They'll see a young, attractive, educated woman and make their own assumptions." Amelia nodded, resolving to maintain a professional distance in all her interactions, especially with Zachary Irwin. The last thing she needed was to become the subject of romantic gossip, just as she was establishing herself as the town's teacher. Saturday morning dawned clear and cool, with a hint of dew still clinging to the grass as Amelia made her way to the livery stable. She had chosen her plainest skirt and a simple shirtwaist, with her most practical boots, not ideal riding attire, but the best she could manage with her limited wardrobe. Zach was already in the yard behind the stable, grooming the chestnut mare she had seen earlier in the week. He looked up at her approach, a smile spreading across his face. "Good morning, Miss Lockhart. Right on time." "Good morning, Mr. Irwin," she replied formally, though she couldn't help returning his smile. There was something infectious about his cheerful demeanor. "Zach," he reminded her. "And this is Penny." He patted the mare's neck affectionately. "The gentlest soul you'll ever meet, perfect for a beginner." Penny was indeed a beautiful animal with a gleaming coat and intelligent eyes. She regarded Amelia curiously, but without alarm. "First things first," Zach said, handing Amelia a brush. "Get acquainted with your mount. Grooming builds trust, and it gives you a chance to check for any injuries or sore spots before you ride." For the next 15 minutes, Zach guided Amelia through the process of grooming Penny, showing her how to use the different brushes and explaining the importance of each step. His instructions were clear and patient, and Amelia found herself relaxing as she worked, the repetitive motions soothing her nerves. "You have a natural touch," Zach observed as she carefully brushed Penny's mane. "Some people are too rough or too timid, but you found the right balance." "Thank you," Amelia said, pleased by the compliment. "She's a beautiful animal. Bred her myself," Zach said proudly. "Her dam was a quarter horse, her sire an Arabian. She's got the stamina of her father and the good sense of her mother." Once the grooming was complete, Zach demonstrated how to saddle and bridle Penny, then had Amelia repeat the process under his watchful eye. His hands occasionally guided hers, adjusting her grip or showing her how to check the girth's tightness, and each brief contact sent an unexpected warmth through her fingers. "Now for the actual riding," Zach said, leading Penny to a mounting block. "We'll start in the corral, just getting you comfortable with the basics." Amelia hesitated at the block, suddenly aware of how high off the ground she would be. In Boston, she had only ever ridden in carriages, never astride a horse. "I'm right here," Zach assured her, seeming to sense her nervousness. "Penny won't move until you tell her to, and I'll be holding her reins until you're comfortable." Taking a deep breath, Amelia stepped onto the block and, following Zach's instructions, swung her leg over the saddle. It felt strange and somewhat precarious, but also exhilarating to be seated atop such a powerful creature. "Excellent," Zach said. "Now, sit up straight, relax your shoulders, and hold the reins like this." He demonstrated with his hands, then helped her position hers correctly. "Your legs should grip the saddle, but not too tightly. Think of it as balancing, not clinging." For the next hour they worked in the corral, with Zach teaching Amelia how to communicate with Penny through subtle movements of the reins, her legs, and even shifts in her weight. The mare responded beautifully to each cue, and by the end of the lesson, Amelia was able to walk and turn confidently without Zach's assistance. "You're a natural," he said as he helped her dismount, his hands at her waist steadying her as her feet touched the ground. "Most beginners take several lessons to get that comfortable." "I had an excellent teacher," Amelia replied, suddenly aware of how close they were standing and the way his hands lingered at her waist a moment longer than necessary. Stepping back, she brushed dust from her skirt, using the motion to regain her composure. "Thank you for the lesson, Mr. Zach. Same time next Saturday." "If that works for you," he agreed. "And perhaps next time we can venture outside the corral if you're feeling confident enough." "I'd like that," Amelia said, surprised to find she truly meant it. The feeling of freedom that had come with controlling Penny's movements had been unexpectedly thrilling. "Now, about your part of our arrangement," Zach said, leading her toward a small office attached to the stable. "I've got some correspondence that could use your expert touch, if you have time now." The office was neat but utilitarian, with a desk, 2 chairs, and shelves filled with ledgers and equipment catalogs. A large map of California and Oregon hung on one wall, with various locations marked in red ink. Zach pulled several sheets of paper from a drawer. "I'm trying to expand my business, supplying horses to the stage lines further north. These are drafts of letters to the stage company managers, but I'm not sure they strike the right tone." Amelia sat at the desk and read through the letters. They were direct and clear, but lacked the formal business language that would convey professionalism to potential partners. For the next half hour, she worked on redrafting them while Zach attended to tasks in the stable, occasionally checking in to answer her questions or clarify his intentions. When she finished, Amelia read the revised letters aloud for his approval. His face brightened with each one. "That's exactly what I was trying to say, only better," he said when she had finished. "You have a gift with words, Miss Lockhart." "Amelia," she found herself saying. "If I'm to call you Zach, you should call me Amelia." His smile widened. "Amelia, then, thank you for this. It's a fair trade. I think you help me sound like a proper businessman, and I teach you to ride like a proper Westerner." "A fair trade indeed," she agreed, rising from the desk. "I should be going. I have lesson plans to finish before Monday." "Of course." He walked her to the stable yard. "Good luck with your first day of school. Those children don't know how fortunate they are to have a teacher like you." His sincerity touched her. "Thank you, Zach. That means a great deal to me." As she walked back toward her uncle's house, Amelia found herself smiling, the weight of her grief momentarily lifted by the simple pleasure of a morning well spent in good company. It wasn't until she was halfway home that she realized this was the first time since Edward's death that she had gone several hours without thinking of him at all. The realization brought a mixture of guilt and relief. Perhaps Uncle Benjamin had been right, the West could be a place to heal. And perhaps Zach Irwin, with his patient instruction and easy smile, was part of that healing process, whether she had intended it or not. Monday morning arrived with a clarity of purpose that Amelia found invigorating. She dressed carefully in one of her more practical dresses, a navy blue with white cuffs and collar that conveyed authority without ostentation, and pinned her hair into a neat, professional style. After a quick breakfast with Uncle Benjamin, she gathered her teaching materials and walked to the schoolhouse, arriving an hour before the children were due to begin arriving. The morning air was crisp with the promise of autumn, and the mountains surrounding Yreka glowed golden in the early sunlight. As she unlocked the schoolhouse door with the key the board had provided, Amelia felt a surge of anticipation. This was her domain now, a place where she could rebuild her sense of purpose, and perhaps find healing in the process of helping others learn. She busied herself lighting the stove to take the chill off the room, arranging books and slates on the desks, and writing the date, September 13, 1875, on the blackboard in her neat handwriting. Just as she finished these preparations, the first students began to arrive. They came in twos and threes, some accompanied by parents eager to meet the new teacher, others arriving independently with curious, assessing gazes. Amelia greeted each one warmly, making mental notes of names and ages as she directed them to seats appropriate for their grade level. By 8 o'clock, all 27 students were seated, ranging from 5-year-old Lily Patterson, clutching a rag doll and looking terrified, to 16-year-old Thomas Mitchell, a tall boy with calloused hands who regarded her with polite skepticism. "Good morning, students," Amelia began, standing at the front of the class with a confidence born of her years teaching in Boston. "I am Miss Lockhart, and I will be your teacher this year. I look forward to getting to know each of you and helping you expand your knowledge and skills." She proceeded to take attendance, matching names to faces, then outlined her expectations for behavior and academic effort. The children were attentive, if somewhat reserved, watching her with the cautious interest that children everywhere show toward a new authority figure. After the introductions, Amelia administered simple assessments to determine each child's current knowledge level. The results confirmed what she had suspected: the education these children had received was practical, but limited, with strengths in basic arithmetic and reading, but significant gaps in writing, geography, and history. By noon, when she dismissed the children for lunch, Amelia had a clearer picture of the challenges ahead. Many of the older boys, like Thomas, attended school irregularly due to work responsibilities at home. Several of the younger children had never been in a formal classroom before. And all of them, regardless of age, viewed her with a mixture of curiosity and reserve, not yet sure what to make of this well-spoken Easterner who had suddenly become responsible for their education. As the children scattered to eat their packed lunches in the schoolyard, Amelia stepped outside to supervise, unwrapping the sandwich Mrs. Chen had prepared for her. She was surveying the schoolyard, noting which children played together and which stood apart, when a familiar voice spoke behind her. "How's the first day going, Miss Lockhart?" She turned to find Zach leaning against the schoolhouse wall, his hat tipped back to reveal those storm-gray eyes that seemed to see more than she intended to show. "Mr. Irwin," she acknowledged, aware of curious glances from the children. "What brings you to the schoolhouse?" "Delivering some books your uncle thought you might need," he explained, holding up a package wrapped in brown paper. "Medical texts with anatomy diagrams. Doc thought they might be useful for your science lessons." "That's very thoughtful," Amelia said, accepting the package. "Please thank him for me." "I will." Zach glanced at the children in the yard. "Quite a collection of scholars you've got there. Any troublemakers identified yet?" Amelia smiled despite herself. "It's only been half a day, but they seem well behaved enough. though I suspect young Billy Anderson may prove a challenge. He's already hidden a frog in Emily Peterson's lunch pail." Zach laughed. "That sounds like Billy. His father was the same way as a boy, according to town legend." His expression grew more serious. "If you need any help with the older boys, let me know. Some of them can be a bit rough around the edges, but they're good kids underneath." "I appreciate the offer, but I'm accustomed to managing a classroom," Amelia assured him, though his concern touched her. Zach nodded, his eyes still on the children. "Of course, I didn't mean to imply otherwise." He straightened up, adjusting his hat. "Well, I should let you get back to your duties. Good luck with the afternoon session." "Thank you for delivering the books," Amelia said, "and for checking in." He tipped his hat with a smile that made her heart beat a little faster. "My pleasure, Miss Lockhart. See you Saturday for your next riding lesson." "I'm looking forward to it," she replied, then immediately wondered if that sounded too eager. But Zach just nodded, his smile deepening at her response. "As am I." As he walked away, several of the older girls gathered near Amelia, their eyes following Zach's retreating figure with undisguised interest. "Mr. Irwin is so handsome," sighed 14-year-old Emma Sullivan, the bank manager's daughter. "Is he courting you, Miss Lockhart?" "Certainly not," Amelia replied firmly. "Mr. Irwin was simply delivering some educational materials from my uncle. Now finish your lunches, girls. We have geography to study this afternoon." As she herded the children back inside, Amelia found herself wondering why Zach had really come to the schoolhouse. The books could easily have been delivered by someone else, or held until she returned to her uncle's house that evening. Had he truly come just to see how her first day was progressing? The thought warmed her, even as she told herself not to read too much into a simple act of neighborly concern. The afternoon session passed quickly, as Amelia divided the children into groups based on their morning assessments and set them to work on appropriate tasks. By the time she dismissed them at 3 o'clock, she had a much clearer understanding of each child's abilities and the challenges she would face in teaching such a diverse group. As the last student departed, Amelia sank into her chair at the teacher's desk, exhausted but satisfied. It had been a good first day, better than she had dared to hope, given the circumstances. The children were willing, if not always able, and she had already begun to form strategies for addressing their varied educational needs. She was gathering her materials to return to Uncle Benjamin's house when the schoolhouse door opened again. Expecting a forgotten lunch pail or a parent with a question, Amelia looked up to find Sarah Anderson standing in the doorway, her expression troubled. "Mrs. Anderson," Amelia greeted her, setting down her papers. "Is everything all right? Did Billy forget something?" "No, nothing like that," Sarah said, stepping into the room and closing the door behind her. "I wanted to apologize for what I said at the ladies' aid meeting. About you and Mr. Irwin, I mean. My husband said I was being gossipy, and he's right. It wasn't my place to make assumptions." Amelia was touched by the sincere apology. "It's quite all right, Mrs. Anderson. No harm done." "Sarah, please," the young woman insisted. "And there might have been harm done. This town thrives on gossip, and the last thing you need as the new teacher is to have your reputation questioned because of innocent riding lessons." "I appreciate your concern," Amelia said carefully. "But I assure you my arrangement with Mr. Irwin is purely practical. As you yourself pointed out, riding is an essential skill here." Sarah nodded, but her expression remained troubled. "Just be careful. Zach's a good man, one of the best, but he's also, well, he's been hurt before." About 5 years back, there was a woman from San Francisco visiting relatives here. They seemed quite serious, but when she returned to the city, she never came back. He doesn't speak of it, but those of us who knew him then saw the change in him." Amelia wasn't sure how to respond to this unexpected confidence. "I'm sorry to hear that, but I assure you, I have no romantic intentions toward Mr. Irwin. I came to Yreka to teach, not to find a husband." Sarah's expression softened. "Of course, I'm overstepping again. Billy had wonderful things to say about you on the ride home, by the way. Said you're the smartest lady he's ever met, which is high praise indeed from my son." Amelia smiled, grateful for the change of subject. "He's a bright boy. A bit mischievous, but eager to learn, which is all any teacher can ask for." They chatted for a few more minutes about Billy's education and Sarah's hopes for his future, then parted on friendly terms, with Sarah inviting Amelia to Sunday dinner the following weekend. As Amelia walked back to her uncle's house, she found herself mulling over Sarah's warning about Zach. So he too had experienced heartbreak. Perhaps that explained the occasional shadow she had glimpsed behind his cheerful demeanor, a hint of old pain carefully masked by his easy smile. The knowledge created an unexpected sense of connection. They had both lost someone they loved, both carried invisible scars beneath their public faces. The difference, Amelia reminded herself firmly, was that she had no intention of risking her heart again. She had come west to forget, to heal, to build a new life centered on her teaching, not to fall in love with a cowboy with storm-gray eyes and a dimpled smile, no matter how kind or understanding he might be. Yet as she prepared for bed that night, reviewing her notes for the next day's lessons, Amelia found her thoughts returning again and again to Zach Irwin and to the promise of their next riding lesson on Saturday morning. The week passed in a blur of lessons, grading, and getting to know her students. Each day, Amelia grew more comfortable in her role as Yreka's schoolteacher, and the children began to respond to her consistent, fair approach with increasing engagement and effort. Even Thomas Mitchell, the skeptical 16-year-old, had shown unexpected interest when she introduced a lesson on surveying techniques that connected mathematics to the practical work many of the older boys would eventually pursue. By Friday afternoon, Amelia felt a genuine sense of accomplishment as she dismissed the children for the weekend. She had survived her first week, established her authority without resorting to the harsh discipline some of the children had clearly expected, and begun to make inroads with even the most reluctant learners. As she was cleaning the blackboard, Uncle Benjamin arrived to walk her home, a routine they had established during the week. "You look pleased with yourself," he observed as they set off toward his house. "I take it the week went well, better than I expected," Amelia admitted. "The children are bright and eager to learn. Once they realized I wasn't going to bore them with endless recitations or rap their knuckles for every mistake." Uncle Benjamin chuckled. "You've already made quite an impression on them, Mrs. Pennyworth told me her granddaughter can't stop talking about the pretty teacher from Boston who knows everything." Amelia laughed. "Hardly everything, but I'm glad Emma's enjoying the lessons." She hesitated, then added, "I've been invited to Sunday dinner at the Andersons' farm. Sarah Mrs. Anderson extended the invitation earlier this week." "The Andersons are good people," her uncle said approvingly, "though their farm is a fair distance from town. Will you ride?" Amelia considered this. Her riding lesson with Zach was scheduled for the next morning. "Perhaps, if tomorrow's lesson goes well, I'd like to practice what I've learned." "Zach won't let you attempt the journey if he doesn't think you're ready," Uncle Benjamin assured her. "He's very conscientious about his students' safety, whether they're horses or humans." As they approached the house, Amelia spotted a familiar figure on the porch. Zach, deep in conversation with Mrs. Chen. He looked up as they approached, his face breaking into that now familiar smile that somehow always seemed to be reserved just for her. "Doc, Miss Lockhart," he greeted them, standing as they climbed the porch steps. "Mrs. Chen was just regaling me with tales of Chinese medicine. Fascinating stuff." "Zach has a curious mind," Uncle Benjamin said to Amelia. "Always eager to learn new things, whether it's horse breeding or herbal remedies." "I hope I'm not intruding," Zach said. "I wanted to check if our lesson is still on for tomorrow, and to let you know we might have perfect weather for a short trail ride if you're feeling up to it." "That sounds wonderful," Amelia said, surprised by her own enthusiasm. "I've been looking forward to putting last week's lessons into practice." "Excellent. 8 o'clock again." When Amelia nodded, Zach turned to her uncle. "And Doc, I brought that liniment you asked for. Works wonders on arthritic joints in horses. Might do the same for your patients with similar complaints." "Much appreciated," Uncle Benjamin said, accepting a small jar from Zach. "Will you stay for dinner? Mrs. Chen has made enough to feed an army as usual." Zach hesitated, his eyes flickering to Amelia. "I wouldn't want to impose." "Not at all," she found herself saying. "Please stay. I'd like to hear more about this trail you're planning for tomorrow so I can prepare accordingly." Something like pleasure flickered in his eyes. "In that case, I accept. Thank you." Dinner was a lively affair, with Uncle Benjamin sharing stories from his medical practice and Zach regaling them with tales of his early days in Yreka, when he had arrived with nothing but the clothes on his back and a determination to build something lasting. Amelia found herself laughing more than she had in months, drawn out of her shell by the easy camaraderie between the two men and their genuine interest in her own stories of Boston and her teaching experiences. "So what brought you west originally?" she asked Zach as Mrs. Chen served apple pie for dessert. "You mentioned arriving 10 years ago, but not why you left wherever you were before." A shadow crossed his face briefly. "Ohio, originally. My father was a blacksmith, wanted me to follow in his footsteps, but I had different ideas. We didn't see eye to eye on much of anything, to be honest. After my mother died, there wasn't much reason to stay. I'd always been fascinated by stories of the West, so when I turned 21, I decided to see it for myself." "That must have taken considerable courage," Amelia observed. "To leave everything familiar behind and journey into the unknown." Zach's eyes met hers, an understanding passing between them. "Sometimes the unknown is less frightening than staying in a place filled with painful memories." Amelia looked away first, unnerved by how accurately he had described her own reasons for coming west. "Yes, I suppose that's true." Uncle Benjamin, sensing the shift in mood, deftly changed the subject to the upcoming harvest festival, and the conversation returned to lighter topics. But Amelia remained aware of Zach's occasional glances, thoughtful and assessing, as if he had recognized something in her that she had not intended to reveal. After dinner, Uncle Benjamin excused himself to answer a medical call, leaving Amelia and Zach alone in the parlor. For a moment, an awkward silence stretched between them, then Zach spoke. "Your uncle mentioned you've been invited to the Andersons for dinner on Sunday." "Yes," Amelia confirmed. "I've gotten to know Sarah through the Ladies' Aid Society, and her son Billy is one of my more spirited students." Zach chuckled. "That's a diplomatic way of putting it. Billy's got more energy than sense sometimes, but he's a good kid at heart." He hesitated, then added, "The Anderson farm is about 5 miles east of town. Not an easy journey for a novice rider." "Are you suggesting I'm not ready for such a ride?" Amelia asked, a hint of challenge in her voice. "Not at all," Zach replied quickly. "You've shown remarkable progress already. I just thought—" He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I thought perhaps you might appreciate company on the journey. The trail can be confusing for someone unfamiliar with the area. Amelia considered his offer. It made practical sense to have an experienced guide, especially for her first long ride. And yet she suspected there was more to his suggestion than mere practicality. "Are you offering to escort me to the Andersons?" she asked directly. "If you'd like," he said, his tone casual though his eyes were intent on her face. "I could meet you at the livery around noon on Sunday. The ride takes about an hour at an easy pace, so we'd arrive in plenty of time for dinner." Amelia weighed her options. Accepting his escort would certainly be the safest course, but it would also fuel the very gossip Sarah had warned her about. On the other hand, attempting the journey alone would be foolhardy for someone with her limited experience. "Thank you," she said finally. "That would be most helpful, but I wouldn't want to impose on your Sunday." "It's no imposition," Zach assured her, a smile warming his features. "I enjoy your company, Amelia, and the Andersons are friends of mine as well. Jack Anderson and I go back years. I helped him build that barn of his after the original one burned down." His frank admission that he enjoyed her company sent an unexpected flutter through Amelia's chest. "Then I accept your offer," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Thank you, Zach." He stood, sensing perhaps that the conversation had reached a natural conclusion. "I should be going. Early start tomorrow for both of us." Amelia walked him to the door, conscious of the quiet house around them and the intimacy of the moment. At the threshold, Zach turned to her, his expression suddenly serious. "Amelia, I hope you know that I respect your reasons for coming west, whatever they may be. I'm not presuming anything by offering my company or my assistance. I just—" He hesitated, then continued softly. "I just think everyone deserves a fresh start, a chance to create new memories to balance out the painful ones." Before she could respond to this unexpectedly perceptive statement, he tipped his hat and stepped into the night, leaving Amelia staring after him, her heart beating a rapid tattoo against her ribs. New memories to balance out the painful ones. Was that what she was seeking? Not to forget Edward entirely, that seemed both impossible and disloyal, but to build a life rich enough, full enough, to contain both her grief and something new, something yet to be defined. As she closed the door and prepared for bed, Amelia found herself looking forward to the next day's riding lesson with an anticipation that had little to do with horsemanship, and everything to do with the man who would be teaching her. Saturday dawned cool and clear, with a hint of autumn crispness in the air that invigorated Amelia as she made her way to the livery stable. She had chosen her most practical outfit, a simple skirt and shirtwaist with her sturdiest boots, and had pinned her hair securely beneath a modest hat that would stay in place during riding. Zach was waiting in the stable yard, already saddling Penny and a tall black gelding that Amelia assumed was for himself. He looked up at her approach, his face lighting with a smile that made her heart skip a beat. "Right on time again," he said approvingly. "I admire punctuality in a student." "A teacher who lacks punctuality can hardly expect it from her students," Amelia replied, pleased by his notice of this small virtue. "True enough. And how was your first week of teaching? Any major disasters to report?" Amelia laughed, relaxing into the easy conversation. "Nothing catastrophic. Billy Anderson's frog was the most exciting incident, though Thomas Mitchell did challenge me on a point of geography until I produced a map to prove the Mississippi River does not, in fact, flow into the Pacific Ocean." Zach chuckled as he finished tightening Penny's girth. "Thomas has a good head on his shoulders, but his father's convinced book learning is a waste of time for a boy destined to work the mines. He'll come around once he sees the practical applications of what you're teaching." "I hope so," Amelia said. "He has potential, If only he'd apply himself. Speaking of applying yourself, Zach said, stepping back from the horses, are you ready to show me what you remember from last week's lesson? At his invitation, Amelia confidently approached Penny, greeting the mare with a gentle pat before checking the saddle and bridle as Zach had taught her. Under his watchful eye, she used the mounting block to climb aboard, settling into the saddle with more ease than she had the previous week. Excellent form, Zach commented, mounting his own horse with the fluid grace of a man who had spent most of his life in the saddle. Remember to keep your back straight but not tense, and let your legs communicate with Penny as much as your hands do. They began with a refresher of the previous week's lessons in the corral, with Amelia practicing walking, stopping, and turning until Zach was satisfied with her progress. Then, to her delight, he opened the corral gate. "Let's try a short trail ride," he suggested. "Just around the perimeter of town to start with, so you can get used to different terrain. If that goes well, we might venture a bit further afield." Excitement and nervousness mingled in Amelia's stomach as she guided Penny through the gate and onto the dirt road that circled Yreka. The mare's steady gait and calm demeanor helped settle her nerves, and Zach stayed close beside her, offering quiet advice and encouragement as they rode. They passed several townsfolk who waved or called greetings, and Amelia was acutely aware of the curious glances that followed their progress. By tomorrow, she knew, word of their ride would have spread throughout Yreka, adding fuel to the gossip Sarah had warned her about. Yet somehow, in the clear morning air with Penny moving steadily beneath her and Zach's reassuring presence beside her, Amelia found she didn't mind as much as she had expected. As they completed the circuit of the town, Zach led them onto a narrow trail that wound eastward through a stand of pine trees. "This is the beginning of the trail to the Anderson farm," he explained. "I thought we might ride a mile or so in that direction, to give you a taste of what tomorrow's journey will be like." The trail was more challenging than the town roads, requiring Amelia to pay closer attention to Penny's movements and the terrain ahead. Branches occasionally hung low across the path, requiring her to duck, and the uneven ground tested her balance in the saddle. But with each obstacle successfully navigated, her confidence grew, and she found herself enjoying the freedom and connection with nature that riding afforded. After about 20 minutes, they emerged from the trees into a small meadow carpeted with late summer wildflowers. Zach drew his horse to a halt, and Amelia did the same, gazing around at the peaceful scene. "It's beautiful," she breathed, taking in the contrast of the golden grass against the dark green of the surrounding pines, with the distant mountains forming a majestic backdrop. "One of my favorite spots," Zach said, dismounting and approaching Penny to help Amelia down. His hands were strong and sure at her waist, and for a moment after her feet touched the ground they stood closer than propriety strictly allowed, his hands lingering as if reluctant to break the contact. Amelia stepped back first, her cheeks warming. "Do you come here often?" she asked, seeking refuge in conversation. "When I need to think, or just to escape the bustle of town for a while," Zach replied, leading the horses to the edge of the meadow where they could graze. "It's peaceful here. Reminds me that there's a bigger world beyond our daily concerns." He spread his coat on the grass and gestured for her to sit. After a moment's hesitation, Amelia joined him, careful to arrange her skirts modestly. They sat in companionable silence for a few minutes, listening to the gentle sounds of the horses grazing and the wind rustling through the pines. "You're doing remarkably well with your riding," Zach said finally. "Most beginners take weeks to develop the confidence you've shown today." "Thank you," Amelia said, pleased by the compliment. "I had an excellent teacher." "And I had a determined student," he countered with a smile. It makes all the difference. A comfortable silence fell between them again, broken only when Zach asked, "Would you tell me about him?" "The man you lost," the question, so unexpected and direct, caught Amelia off guard. "How did you?" "Your uncle mentioned there had been a tragedy," Zach said gently. "And I've recognized the look in your eyes from the moment we met. It's one I've seen in my own mirror. The look of someone carrying grief like a hidden burden." Amelia stared out at the meadow, gathering her thoughts. She had not spoken of Edward to anyone since leaving Boston, had deliberately avoided even thinking of him too directly, as if the memories might overwhelm her if given free rein. "His name was Edward," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Edward Blackwell. We were to be married last spring. He was." She hesitated, searching for words that could encompass the man she had loved. "He was kind and intelligent and so full of plans for our future together. He was a lawyer, dedicated to helping those who couldn't afford proper legal representation." "He sounds like a good man," Zach said quietly. "He was." Amelia twisted her hands in her lap, feeling the familiar ache of loss rising in her chest. "There was an outbreak of influenza last winter. Edward insisted on visiting a client in one of the poorer districts, despite the risks. He fell ill a few days later. The doctors did everything they could, but—" She trailed off, unable to continue. Zach's hand covered hers, warm and steady. "I'm sorry, Amelia, truly," she nodded, blinking back the tears that threatened. "Afterward, I couldn't bear to stay in Boston. Everywhere I went, there were memories of him, plans we had made together, futures we had imagined that would never come to pass. The teaching position here seemed like a chance to, not to forget him exactly, but to find a way to live with his loss without being defined by it." "I understand," Zach said, and something in his tone told Amelia that he truly did. "After my Caroline left, I threw myself into building the livery, working from dawn till dusk until I was too exhausted to think or feel." "Caroline?" Amelia asked softly, recognizing the opening he had offered. Zach's eyes took on a distant look. "Caroline Webster. She was visiting her aunt here in Yreka about 5 years ago. Beautiful, educated, everything I wasn't. But somehow we connected. Or I thought we did." His expression hardened slightly. "She returned to San Francisco, promising to write, to return. The letters came for a while, then grew less frequent, then stopped altogether. Eventually I learned she had married a banker, someone from her own social circle." "I'm sorry," Amelia said, understanding now the shadow Sarah had mentioned, the old wound that had shaped the man beside her. Zach shrugged, but the casual gesture didn't mask the hurt still visible in his eyes. "It was a long time ago. And unlike your Edward, Caroline didn't die, she just chose someone else. That's a different kind of pain, I suppose." "Loss is loss," Amelia said quietly. "The absence of someone who mattered to you leaves the same emptiness, regardless of how they came to be gone." He looked at her then, really looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You understand," he said, wonder in his voice. "That's why I felt connected to you from the first. You know what it's like to rebuild a life around an absence." The recognition between them was palpable, a shared understanding that transcended the short time they had known each other. For a moment, Amelia allowed herself to imagine what it might be like to lean into that understanding, to allow this connection to deepen into something more. But the memory of Edward's face rose in her mind, and with it, a renewed sense of loyalty to his memory. It was too soon, too raw still. She wasn't ready to risk her heart again, not when the wounds from its last breaking were still healing. As if sensing her withdrawal, Zach stood and offered his hand to help her up. "We should head back. You've had enough riding for one day, and you'll want to be fresh for tomorrow's journey." The ride back to town was quieter, each of them absorbed in their own thoughts. Yet Amelia felt a subtle shift had occurred between them, a deepening of understanding that made her both uneasy and strangely comforted. They had shared confidences, recognized in each other a similar woundedness. It created a bond that felt both inevitable and frightening in its implications. At the livery stable, Zach helped her dismount and taught her how to properly cool down and groom Penny after a ride. The familiar tasks helped restore some normalcy to their interaction, and by the time Amelia was ready to leave, she felt more composed. "Thank you for the lesson," she said formally, standing at the stable entrance. "And for listening." Zach studied her face for a moment. "Thank you for trusting me with your story," he replied. "I'll meet you here tomorrow at noon for the ride to the Andersons." Amelia nodded. "I'll be here." As she walked back to her uncle's house, Amelia felt a curious mixture of emotions, grief freshly stirred by speaking of Edward, anxiety about the growing connection with Zach, and beneath it all, a subtle current of hope that perhaps, despite everything, her heart had not permanently closed itself to the possibility of happiness. That evening, as she sat with Uncle Benjamin in his parlor, reading while he worked on patient notes, Amelia found her thoughts continually drifting to the conversation in the meadow. She had spoken Edward's name aloud for the first time in months, and while the pain was still there, it felt somehow less overwhelming, as if sharing the burden had lightened it slightly. "You're very quiet tonight," Uncle Benjamin observed, looking up from his papers. "Everything all right with your riding lesson?" "Yes, it went well," Amelia said. "Zach is an excellent teacher. He thinks I'm ready for the ride to the Andersons tomorrow." "I'm glad to hear it." He studied her face. "But something's troubling you, I can tell." Amelia hesitated, then decided to confide in the one person who might truly understand her confusion. "Uncle Benjamin, when is it appropriate to move forward after losing someone you loved? How do you know when it's time to open your heart again without being disloyal to their memory?" Understanding dawned in her uncle's eyes. "Ah," he said softly. "This is about Zach, isn't it?" Amelia nodded, her cheeks warming. "I didn't come here looking for anything of that nature. I came to teach, to heal. But Zach understands loss in a way few others do. There's a connection between us that I wasn't expecting and don't know what to do with." Uncle Benjamin set aside his papers and leaned forward in his chair. "Amelia, my dear, grief doesn't operate on a timetable. There's no prescribed period after which it becomes appropriate to feel joy or love again. Your Edward, from everything you and your father told me about him, was a kind and generous man who wanted your happiness above all else. Do you truly believe he would want you to close yourself off to the possibility of love forever?" Put that way, the answer was clear. "No," she admitted. "He wouldn't, but it feels disloyal somehow to be drawn to someone else when I still miss him so deeply." "The heart has a remarkable capacity to expand," her uncle said gently. "Loving someone new doesn't diminish the love you had for Edward. It honors it. In a way, it says that the love he taught you to feel was so powerful, so transformative, that it enabled you to love again, even after terrible loss." His words settled over Amelia like a comforting blanket. She had been so focused on the idea that moving forward meant leaving Edward behind, she hadn't considered that he would always be part of her, that the capacity to love again was itself a testament to what they had shared. "Thank you, Uncle," she said, reaching over to squeeze his hand. "You've given me a great deal to think about." "That's what uncles are for," he replied with a warm smile. "And for what it's worth, I think Zach Irwin is a fine man who would treat your heart with the care it deserves, when and if you decide to entrust it to him." Amelia nodded, grateful for his understanding and wisdom. She wasn't ready to make any decisions yet, but perhaps she could allow herself to explore this unexpected connection without feeling that she was betraying Edward's memory. With that comforting thought, she returned to her book, though her mind continued to drift to storm gray eyes and the promise of tomorrow's ride. Sunday dawned bright and clear, perfect weather for a ride into the countryside. Amelia dressed with care in one of her nicer dresses, a sage green that complemented her eyes, over which she would wear a practical riding jacket for the journey to the Andersons. She twisted her hair into a simple chignon that would fit beneath her hat, while still appearing presentable for dinner. Uncle Benjamin had been called to attend a patient early that morning, so Amelia breakfasted alone, her thoughts alternating between anticipation of the ride ahead and reflection on her conversation with her uncle the previous evening. By the time she set out for the livery at 11:45, she had resolved to approach the day with an open mind and heart, neither rushing into nor closing herself off from whatever might develop between herself and Zach. The livery stable was bustling with Sunday activity. When she arrived, several townspeople preparing horses for afternoon rides or hitching teams to wagons for visits to outlying farms. Zach was in the center of it all, offering advice here, adjusting a harness there, his competence and authority evident in every movement. He spotted Amelia immediately, his face brightening as he excused himself from a conversation with one of his customers and made his way to her side. "Right on time, as always," he greeted her, his eyes taking in her appearance with evident appreciation. "You look lovely, Amelia." "Thank you," she replied, feeling a blush rise to her cheeks at his direct compliment. "I hope I'm dressed appropriately for the ride." "Perfectly," he assured her. "I've got Penny saddled and ready for you, and I packed a canteen of water in case you get thirsty on the journey." He led her to where Penny and his black gelding, whom he introduced as Thunder, stood ready. Amelia greeted the chestnut mare with genuine affection, stroking her velvety nose and offering an apple she had brought from Uncle Benjamin's kitchen. "She remembers you," Zach observed with a smile. "Horses are good judges of character." With his assistance, Amelia mounted, settling into the saddle with growing confidence. Zach checked her stirrups and the position of her reins before mounting Thunder, and then they were off, riding side by side through Yreka's quiet Sunday streets toward the Eastern Trail. The day was perfect for riding, warm enough to be pleasant, but with a cooling breeze that carried the scent of pine and wildflowers. As they left the town behind and entered the forest trail, Amelia found herself relaxing into the rhythm of Penny's steady gait, enjoying the dappled sunlight filtering through the trees and the soft sounds of the forest around them. "You're a natural horsewoman," Zach commented after they had ridden in companionable silence for a while. "You've taken to riding as if you were born to it." "Hardly that," Amelia laughed, "but I am enjoying it more than I expected. There's a freedom to it that I never experienced in Boston, where ladies ride in carriages or side saddle in the park, always constrained by what's proper and acceptable." "The West has different standards of propriety," Zach agreed. "Out here, practicality often outweighs convention. A woman who can ride, shoot if necessary, and manage on her own when circumstances require it is valued more than one who merely looks decorative but can't fend for herself." "Is that why you offered to teach me?" Amelia asked, curious. "To help me become more practical and self-sufficient?" Zach considered this. "Partly," he admitted. "I could see you had the spirit for it beneath those Eastern manners, but mostly I just wanted an excuse to spend time with you." The frankness of his admission startled her. "Why?" she asked before she could think better of it. He glanced at her, his expression open and unguarded. "Because from the moment I saw you step down from that stagecoach, looking so brave and determined despite the exhaustion in your eyes. I knew you were someone I wanted to know better. Someone special. Amelia's heart quickened at his words. You hardly knew me. True, he acknowledged with a small smile. But I've learned to trust my instincts about people. They rarely lead me astray. And what do your instincts tell you now that you know me better? She asked, her voice softer than she intended. Zach's eyes held hers for a long moment. That I was right the first time. You are special, Amelia Lockhart, brave and kind and stronger than you give yourself credit for. The sincerity in his voice left her momentarily speechless. Before she could formulate a response, the trail widened and opened into a clearing that revealed the Anderson farm, in the distance a neat homestead with a large barn. A two-story farmhouse painted white with blue trim like Uncle Benjamin's, and fields of wheat and corn stretching toward the horizon. We're almost there, Zach said, pointing toward the farm. That's the new barn I helped Jack build after the fire 3 years ago. Solid construction, if I do say so myself. Grateful for the shift to safer conversational ground, Amelia asked about the barn raising, and for the remainder of their ride, Zach entertained her with stories of the community coming together to help the Andersons recover from the devastating fire that had claimed their original barn and nearly half their livestock. As they approached the farm, they were spotted by Billy, who came running down the lane to greet them, his face alight with excitement. Miss Lockhart, Ma said you might ride out with Mr. Irwin, but I didn't believe you could ride yet, the boy exclaimed as they drew their horses to a halt. Mr. Irwin is an excellent teacher, Amelia replied, smiling at the boy's enthusiasm, though I still have much to learn. Sarah and Jack Anderson emerged from the farmhouse to welcome them. Sarah with a knowing glance between Amelia and Zach that suggested she had anticipated this joint arrival. Jack with a hearty handshake for Zach and a courteous bow for Amelia. Welcome to our home, Miss Lockhart, Jack said warmly. Billy's told us so much about his new teacher we feel we know you already. All good things, I hope, Amelia replied with a smile, accepting his help to dismount while Zach saw to the horses. Mostly, Jack chuckled, though there was some grumbling about the amount of arithmetic you've assigned. Sarah looped her arm through Amelia's, leading her toward the house. Don't mind Jack. He's as proud as can be that Billy has such a fine education available to him. Neither of us had much schooling growing up, and we want better for our children. The farmhouse was simple but comfortable, with handmade furniture and colorful quilts adding warmth to the main living area. The smells of roasting chicken and fresh bread filled the air, making Amelia realize how hungry the ride had made her. Dinner was a lively affair, with Billy keeping everyone entertained with stories from school and Jack and Zach discussing local farming matters. Amelia found herself drawn into conversation with Sarah about the upcoming Harvest Festival, for which the Ladies' Aid Society was organizing various activities. Throughout the meal, Amelia was acutely aware of Zach's presence across the table, of his occasional glances in her direction, and the way his laugh seemed to warm the entire room. There was an ease to his interactions with the Anderson family that spoke of long friendship and genuine affection, and she found herself admiring the way he listened attentively to Billy's excited chatter, treating the boys' opinions with the same respect he showed the adults. After dinner, while Sarah and Amelia cleared the table, Jack suggested that Zach show Amelia the view from the hill behind the barn, where on clear days like today, the distant mountains were particularly spectacular. That's a wonderful idea, Sarah agreed quickly, with a pointed look at her husband that made Amelia suspect this had been prearranged. You two go ahead. Billy can help me with the dishes. But Ma, Billy protested, clearly not part of this conspiracy. "No arguments, young man," Sarah said firmly. "Miss Lockhart is our guest, and guests don't wash dishes in this house." With mild embarrassment but also a flutter of anticipation, Amelia found herself walking beside Zach toward the hill, their shoulders occasionally brushing as they navigated the narrow path that wound behind the barn and up the gentle slope. "I suspect we're being manipulated," Zach said with a rueful smile once they were out of earshot of the house. Sarah did seem unusually insistent, Amelia agreed, grateful that he had acknowledged the obvious matchmaking attempt. "Jack and Sarah are good friends, but subtlety isn't their strong suit," Zach chuckled. "Though I can't say I mind the opportunity for a private conversation with you." They reached the top of the hill, and Amelia's breath caught at the view that spread before them, the Anderson farm below, then rolling hills covered in golden grass and dark green forests, and beyond, the majestic mountains rising against the clear blue sky. "It's magnificent," she said softly, turning slowly to take in the panoramic vista. "Worth the conspiracy?" Zach asked, his eyes on her face rather than the landscape. Amelia met his gaze, feeling a warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the afternoon sun. "Yes," she admitted. "Worth it indeed." They stood in silence for a moment, both aware of the subtle shift occurring between them, the unspoken possibilities hanging in the air like the golden dust motes dancing in the sunlight. "Amelia," Zach began, his voice serious now, "I know you came west to forget, to heal from your loss, and I respect that more than I can say. But I find myself hoping that perhaps, in time, you might also find new reasons to remember this place, new memories worth cherishing." The earnestness in his eyes touched her deeply. "I think perhaps I already am," she said softly. Zach took a step closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of blue in his gray eyes, the slight unevenness of his tan where his hat typically shaded his forehead. "I care for you, Amelia. More than I expected to, and certainly sooner than I intended. I'm not asking for promises or commitments. I just want you to know that when you're ready, if you ever are, I'll be here." His honesty, the gentle patience in his offer, moved her more than any passionate declaration could have. This was a man who understood waiting, who knew the value of allowing wounds to heal properly rather than rushing to cover them. "Thank you," she whispered, reaching out to touch his arm lightly. "I care for you too, Zach. I'm just not certain yet what that means or what I'm ready for." He covered her hand with his own. "Then we'll discover it together, at whatever pace feels right to you." The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken emotions and possibilities. Then, with obvious reluctance, Zach stepped back slightly. "We should probably return to the house before Sarah sends Billy up here to investigate." Amelia laughed, grateful for the lightening of the mood. "Yes, I suspect she's already imagining wedding bells." "Can you blame her?" Zach asked with a teasing smile. "We make a handsome couple, Miss Lockhart." The casual confidence of his statement brought a blush to her cheeks, but she didn't contradict him. Instead, she took the arm he offered, and they walked back down the hill toward the farmhouse, each lost in private thoughts but connected by the simple touch, and the shared understanding that something significant had begun between them, something that would unfold in its own time, when they were both ready. The weeks that followed took on a rhythm that felt increasingly natural to Amelia. Her days were filled with teaching, a vocation that brought her genuine satisfaction as she witnessed her students' progress and growing enthusiasm for learning. The children had accepted her fully now, their initial reserve replaced by eager participation, and, in many cases, obvious affection. Saturdays brought riding lessons with Zach, which had evolved into leisurely explorations of the countryside surrounding Yreka. Under his patient guidance, Amelia's confidence and skill as a rider grew until she could comfortably manage Penny on varied terrain and at different gates. These excursions became the highlights of her week opportunities to discover the natural beauty of Northern California, while deepening her connection with Zach through conversations that ranged from literature to local history, from their childhood memories to their hopes for the future. Sundays were typically spent at church in the morning, followed by dinner with Uncle Benjamin, and often an afternoon visiting with friends she had made through the Ladies' Aid Society or attending community gatherings. Yreka's social life, while less formal than Boston's, was surprisingly vibrant, with musical evenings, quilting bees, and various celebrations marking the rhythms of rural life. Through it all, Amelia's relationship with Zach continued to develop at the careful pace they had silently agreed upon. He never pressed for more than she was ready to give, content with the gradual deepening of their connection. He brought her wildflowers for her classroom, recommended books he thought she might enjoy, and found countless small ways to demonstrate his growing feelings for her without making demands or creating pressure. For her part, Amelia found herself increasingly able to think of Edward without the crushing weight of grief that had once accompanied his memory. He would always be a part of her, a first love that had shaped her in countless ways, but the sharp edges of her loss were gradually softening, allowing space for new feelings to emerge. By mid-October, with the harvest festival approaching and the mountains beginning to show the first hints of autumn color, Amelia realized that she had not thought of Boston as home in weeks. Yreka, with its unpretentious warmth and the connections she had formed here, had quietly claimed that title in her heart. The Harvest Festival was scheduled for the third weekend of October, and the entire town was buzzing with preparations. As the schoolteacher, Amelia was responsible for organizing the children's contributions, recitations, songs, and displays of their best work from the first months of school. It meant extra hours of preparation and rehearsal, but she found the children's enthusiasm infectious and threw herself into the project wholeheartedly. The Friday before the festival, as Amelia was supervising the final rehearsal of the children's choir in the schoolyard during the lunch break, she looked up to find Zach watching from the fence, a fond smile playing at his lips. "That sounds wonderful, children," she called as they finished a somewhat uneven but enthusiastic rendition of Yreka. "Remember to project your voices tomorrow so everyone in the square can hear you. Now, finish your lunches before we return to our lessons." As the children scattered, Zach approached, carrying a small package wrapped in brown paper. "The future musicians of America," he commented with a grin. "They sound enthusiastic," Amelia laughed. "Enthusiasm counts for a lot when you're dealing with children. What brings you to the schoolhouse in the middle of the day? I thought you were helping set up the booths in the town square." "I was," Zach confirmed, "but I wanted to bring you this before tomorrow's festivities." He handed her the package, a small token for the Harvest Festival. Curious, Amelia unwrapped the paper to reveal a beautifully crafted leather-bound journal, the cover tooled with an intricate design of wildflowers similar to those they had seen on their first ride to the meadow. "Zach, it's beautiful," she breathed, running her fingers over the detailed craftsmanship. "I thought you might use it to record your experiences here," he explained, a hint of uncertainty in his voice. "Or for lesson plans or whatever you wish." The leatherworker owed me a favor, and when I described what I wanted. "It's perfect," Amelia assured him, deeply touched by the thoughtfulness of the gift. "Thank you." Their eyes met, and in that moment, Amelia recognized the depth of her feelings for this kind, patient man who had somehow worked his way into her heart when she had believed it permanently closed. The realization both frightened and exhilarated her. "Will you save a dance for me tomorrow?" Zach asked, his voice lower now, meant only for her ears despite the children playing nearby. "I don't know if dancing with the livery owner is considered appropriate behavior for the schoolteacher," she teased, though her heart quickened at the thought. "I think we're past worrying about appearances, don't you?" he replied with a slow smile. "Besides, half the town already assumes we're courting." The word courting hung between them, neither confirming nor denying the implication. "Are we?" Amelia asked softly, finally voicing the question that had lingered unspoken for weeks. Zach's expression grew serious. "I'd like to be if you're ready, but only if you're truly ready, Amelia. I can wait as long as you need." The sincerity in his eyes, the patience and understanding he had consistently shown her, made Amelia's decision suddenly, startlingly clear. Edward would always be a part of her past, a cherished memory, but Zach's steady, kind, perceptive Zach could be her future if she was brave enough to reach for it. "Yes," she said, her voice steady despite the fluttering in her chest. "I believe I am ready, Zach. And yes, I will save a dance for you tomorrow, more than one if you ask nicely." The smile that spread across his face was like the sun breaking through clouds. "I'll ask very nicely," he promised, his eyes alight with happiness. "And I'll hold you to that promise, Miss Lockhart." Before she could respond, the school bell rang, signaling the end of the lunch break. "Saved by the bell," Amelia said with a smile. "I should get back to my students. And I should finish helping with the festival preparations," Zach agreed, though he made no move to leave. "Tomorrow, then." "Tomorrow," she confirmed. "And thank you again for the journal. It's a gift I'll treasure." As he finally turned to go, Amelia found herself watching his retreating figure with a lightness in her heart she had not felt in a very long time. She had come west to forget, to escape the painful memories that had threatened to define her life. Instead, she had found new memories worth making, new reasons to look forward rather than back, and a man whose patience and understanding had given her the time and space she needed to heal. The harvest festival dawned bright and clear, the crisp October air carrying the scent of fallen leaves and the promise of winter to come. Amelia dressed with special care in a russet-colored dress that complemented her auburn hair and brought out the green in her eyes. It was one of her Boston dresses, but today it felt like putting on a costume from a former life, a reminder of how much she had changed in the months since her arrival in Yreka. The town square had been transformed overnight into a festive space, with booths selling everything from preserves to handcrafted furniture, a central area cleared for dancing, and a raised platform where various performances would take place throughout the day. Colorful bunting hung between the buildings, and the enticing smells of roasting meat, baked goods, and spiced cider filled the air. Amelia's first duty was to supervise the children's choir performance, scheduled for 10 o'clock. She gathered her young charges near the platform, straightening collars and calming nerves with the practiced ease of an experienced teacher. As they took their places on the platform, she caught sight of Zach in the gathering crowd, standing beside Uncle Benjamin, both men watching her with evident pride. The performance went better than she had dared hope, with the children remembering all the words and only a few wavering on the higher notes. The crowd responded with enthusiastic applause, and Amelia felt a surge of pride in her students, and in the small part she had played in bringing music to this community celebration. As the day progressed, Amelia found herself fully integrated into the life of Yreka in a way she had not anticipated when she first arrived. Townspeople greeted her by name. Mothers thanked her for her work with their children, and several of her adult friends insisted on introducing her to visitors from neighboring communities as our wonderful new teacher from Boston who has brought such fresh ideas to our school. By late afternoon, when the fiddlers began tuning up for the dancing, Amelia had judged a pie contest, helped serve at the Ladies' Aid Society booth, and watched several of her students win ribbons in various competitions. She was taking a well-deserved break, sipping cider at the edge of the square, when Zach appeared at her side. "You've been busy," he observed, his eyes taking in her slightly disheveled appearance with obvious appreciation. "I've been trying to get a moment alone with you all day." "The life of a teacher at a community festival," Amelia replied with a smile. "Everyone wants to tell me about their child's latest accomplishment or ask about the Christmas pageant plans. And here I thought I was the only one with plans for Christmas," Zach said, a teasing glint in his eye. "Oh, and what plans might those be, Mr. Irwin?" Amelia asked, warming to the playful exchange. Before he could answer, the fiddlers struck up a lively reel, and couples began moving toward the central dancing area. "I believe you promised me a dance, Miss Lockhart," Zach said, offering his hand. "And I intend to collect on that promise before someone else claims your attention." Amelia placed her hand in his, feeling a now familiar flutter in her chest at the contact. "I always honor my promises, Mr. Irwin." He led her to the dancing area and took her in his arms as the music shifted to a waltz. Though she had danced countless times at Boston's society balls, Amelia found this simple country waltz with Zach far more meaningful than any elaborate cotillion she had attended in her former life. "You dance well," she observed as he guided her smoothly through the steps, one hand at her waist, the other holding hers in a gentle but secure grip. "Another skill acquired for practical purposes," he replied with a smile. "In a small town, a man who can't dance might as well resign himself to a solitary existence." "And you're not a solitary man by nature," Amelia said, the statement half question, half observation. "Not anymore," Zach said softly, his eyes holding hers. "Not since a certain schoolteacher from Boston stepped off the stagecoach and into my life." The simple honesty of his declaration touched Amelia deeply. "I came west to forget," she said, echoing the words they had spoken on the hill behind the Anderson farm. "But you've given me so many new memories, Zach. Good ones that don't erase the past but make the present worth living fully." His hand tightened slightly at her waist. "That's all I've wanted for you, Amelia, to see you embrace life again with all its joys and possibilities." They danced in silence for a moment, each absorbing the significance of their exchange. Then, as the music drew to a close, Zach spoke again. "Would you walk with me? There's something I'd like to show you." Curious, Amelia nodded, and he led her away from the dancing area through the crowd and toward the edge of town. They walked in comfortable silence until they reached a small hill overlooking Yreka, with a clear view of the mountains beyond. "This is where I first decided to stay," Zach said, gesturing toward the town below, now bustling with festival activity. "I had been traveling for months, drifting from place to place, when I happened upon Yreka. I climbed this hill that first evening, watched the sunset over those mountains, and something just clicked. I knew I had found home." Amelia understood the feeling perfectly. "It has a way of drawing you in," she agreed. "When I arrived, I thought I would always feel like an outsider, the Boston teacher who didn't belong. But now, Zach prompted gently when she hesitated. "Now I can't imagine being anywhere else," she finished simply. "This place, these people, they've become home to me in a way Boston never truly was, even before." She trailed off, but the understanding in Zach's eyes told her he knew what she meant. "Amelia," he said, taking both her hands in his, "I didn't bring you up here just to show you the view. I wanted a moment of privacy for what I'm about to say." He drew a deep breath. "I love you. I think I've loved you since that first day, though I didn't recognize it immediately. You've brought light back into my life, a sense of purpose and possibility I had forgotten could exist." Amelia felt tears prick at her eyes, but they were tears of joy rather than sorrow. "Oh, Zach," she whispered, "I love you too. It happened so gradually, so unexpectedly, that I didn't realize how deep my feelings had grown until recently. But they're real and true and—" She didn't finish the sentence because Zach had drawn her into his arms, his lips finding hers in a kiss that was both gentle and fervent, a perfect expression of the emotions they had just declared. Amelia responded with a wholehearted abandon that surprised her, years of proper Boston reserve melting away in the warmth of genuine feeling. When they finally parted, Zach rested his forehead against hers, his breathing slightly uneven. "I've wanted to do that for a very long time," he admitted with a smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "I'm glad you waited until I was ready," Amelia replied, her hand still resting on his shoulders. "I would have waited forever if necessary," Zach said simply. "But I'm grateful I didn't have to." They stood together on the hilltop, the sounds of the festival drifting up from the town below, the mountains standing sentinel in the distance. In that moment, Amelia felt a sense of rightness, of belonging, that she had feared might never be hers again after Edward's death. "We should return to the festival," she said eventually, though reluctantly. "People will wonder where we've gone." "Let them wonder," Zach replied with a mischievous glint in his eye, but he offered her his arm and began leading her back toward town. As they walked, arm in arm down the hill, Amelia reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment, a journey begun in grief and desperation, but leading, unexpectedly, to joy and hope. She had come west to forget, but instead had found new reasons to remember, new memories worth cherishing, and a love that honored her past while promising a future filled with possibility. The winter of 1875-1876 was one of the coldest in Northern California's memory, with heavy snows blanketing Yreka from early December through February. For Amelia, however, it was a season of warmth and deepening connections, both with the community she now called home and with the man who had become the center of her world. Her courtship with Zach progressed with a natural ease that sometimes surprised her, given how cautious they had both been initially. He called at Uncle Benjamin's house several evenings a week, often bringing small gifts, a book he thought she might enjoy, wildflower honey from a farmer whose horses he tended, or simply a specially carved wooden puzzle for her to solve while they sat together in the parlor. On Sundays after church, they would have dinner with Uncle Benjamin, then spend the afternoon riding when weather permitted, or simply walking through town, planning for the future they both now acknowledged they wanted to share. The townsfolk had quickly accepted their relationship, many expressing satisfaction that the teacher and the horseman had found each other, as if it had been inevitable from the start. Christmas brought a new level of intimacy to their relationship. The school's holiday pageant was a resounding success, with even the most reluctant students performing their parts with unexpected enthusiasm. Afterward, at the community celebration in the town hall, Zach presented Amelia with a small velvet box containing a delicate gold locket. "Open it," he urged as they stood slightly apart from the festivities, his eyes bright with anticipation. Inside, she found a miniature pressed flower, a blue lupine, preserved from the meadow where they had first truly opened their hearts to each other. So you never forget the place where our journey together really began, Zach explained, helping her fasten the chain around her neck. Deeply moved, Amelia had given him her own carefully chosen gift, a silver pocket watch to replace the battered timepiece he had carried for years, engraved with the simple message, "For all our moments to come." New Year's Eve marked another milestone in their relationship. After the town's celebration, as midnight approached, Zach had taken Amelia on a moonlit ride to their meadow, now transformed by snow into a glistening wonderland. There, with the stars overhead and their breath forming clouds in the frigid air, he had officially asked her to marry him. "I know we haven't known each other long by some standards," he had said, holding her gloved hands in his, "but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you, Amelia Lockhart, and I want to build a life with you here in the place that brought us together." With tears of joy freezing on her cheeks, Amelia had accepted, knowing in her heart that Edward would have approved of this good, honest man who had helped her find her way back to happiness. They set the wedding date for early June, after the school term ended, giving them time to plan a simple but meaningful ceremony, and for Amelia to write to her father in Boston, inviting him to journey west for the occasion. His reply, when it came in late February, was heartfelt and supportive, expressing his happiness at her newfound joy and promising to arrive in Yreka by late May. As winter grudgingly gave way to spring, Amelia found herself busier than ever, balancing her teaching duties with wedding preparations and helping Zach with plans to expand their living quarters. He had begun construction on a proper house adjacent to the livery, a 2-story home with plenty of space for the family they both hoped to have. "It won't be as grand as what you were used to in Boston," he had said apologetically as he showed her the plans, "but it will be solid and comfortable with room to grow." "It will be perfect," Amelia had assured him, genuinely excited about the simple, practical home that would be theirs. "And far more welcoming than many of the grand houses I knew in Boston, which often felt more like museums than homes." By May, the house was nearing completion, with Zach working alongside the builders whenever he could spare time from the livery. Amelia found herself increasingly drawn to the construction site, imagining the life they would build within those walls, the children who might one day fill the rooms with laughter, the years of love and partnership that stretched before them. Her father's arrival in late May brought another dimension to her happiness. William Lockhart, a distinguished-looking man in his early 60s with the same auburn hair as his daughter, now streaked with gray, stepped down from the stagecoach with a mixture of weariness and anticipation on his face. "Papa," Amelia cried, rushing forward to embrace him. "You're finally here, my dear girl," he said, holding her at arm's length to study her face. "You look transformed. The West agrees with you, it seems." "It's more than the West, Papa," Amelia replied, linking her arm through his as they walked toward Uncle Benjamin's house, where he would be staying. "It's everything: the teaching, the community, and especially Zach. I can't wait for you to meet him." "From your letters, I feel I know him already," her father said with a smile. "Though I admit I'm eager to meet the man who has brought such happiness back to my daughter's life." That evening, at a special dinner Uncle Benjamin had arranged to welcome his brother-in-law, Amelia watched with growing delight as her father and her fiancé bonded over shared interests in literature and history. Despite their different backgrounds, William a Boston attorney, Zach a self-made Western businessman, they found common ground in their love of learning and their obvious devotion to Amelia. "Your daughter has transformed our school and our community," Zach told William as they enjoyed after-dinner brandy in Uncle Benjamin's study. The children adore her, and the parents are amazed at how much their little ones have learned in just one school year. Amelia always had a gift for teaching, William replied, his pride evident. Even as a child, she was constantly organizing her friends into classes and instructing them in whatever she had recently learned herself. Her mother and I always knew she would excel in the profession. The mention of her mother, who had died when Amelia was just 9, brought a momentary pang, but it was softened by the knowledge that both her father and uncle were here to represent her family at the wedding, and that Zach's steadfast love would help create a new family for her future. The wedding day dawned clear and warm, a perfect early June day with wildflowers blooming across the meadows, and the mountains standing majestic against a cloudless blue sky. Amelia prepared in Uncle Benjamin's house, assisted by Sarah Anderson and several other women from the Ladies' Aid Society, who had taken the Eastern spinster schoolteacher firmly under their collective wing from the moment she arrived in Yreka. Her dress, ordered from San Francisco based on patterns in the latest fashion magazines, was simpler than what would have been expected in Boston society, but perfect for a Western bride. Ivory silk with delicate lace trim, the skirt less full than Eastern styles to allow for the practical realities of life in Yreka. Her veil, borrowed from Mrs. Whittaker, who had worn it at her own wedding 30 years earlier, was anchored by a crown of fresh wildflowers gathered that morning from the meadow where Zach had first told her about Caroline. As Sarah helped arrange the veil, Amelia caught sight of herself in the mirror and was struck by the difference between this reflection and the grieving, uncertain woman who had arrived in Yreka less than a year ago. Her eyes were bright with happiness, her posture confident, her entire being radiating a joy she had once thought lost forever. "You look beautiful," Sarah said softly, meeting Amelia's eyes in the mirror. "Zach won't know what hit him." Amelia smiled, touching the locket at her throat, her something old for the wedding, a tangible connection to the journey that had brought her to this day. "I still sometimes can't believe how much has changed since I stepped off that stagecoach last summer." "You were meant to find each other," Sarah said with the certainty of a true romantic. "Some people just are." The ceremony took place in the Methodist church, which had been decorated with wildflowers and ribbons by Amelia's students and their mothers. As her father walked her down the aisle, Amelia felt a moment of bittersweet remembrance for the wedding that had never happened in Boston, for Edward who had been taken too soon. But the feeling passed as she caught sight of Zach waiting for her at the altar, his face alight with love and wonder. Dressed in a new suit, his usually unruly hair tamed for the occasion, he looked both familiar and somehow knew the man she had come to love so deeply, now about to become her husband. As she reached him and her father placed her hand in his, Amelia felt the last lingering shadows of her grief finally lift, replaced by the certainty that this was exactly where she was meant to be. The ceremony was brief but meaningful, with Reverend Hayes speaking eloquently about the joining of two lives that had each known sorrow but had found joy again in each other. Amelia and Zach had written their own vows, simple declarations of love and commitment that moved many in the congregation to tears. "I came west to forget," Amelia said, her voice steady as she gazed into Zach's eyes. "But you gave me reasons to remember that life continues, that love endures, that happiness can be found even after the deepest loss. I promise to stand beside you through whatever comes, to build a life and a family with you, and to never forget how precious this second chance at love truly is." Zach's voice was husky with emotion as he responded. "Amelia, from the moment you arrived in Yreka, something in me recognized something in you, a kindred spirit who understood both loss and hope. You've brought light back into my world, purpose to my days, and joy to my heart. I promise to cherish you always, to support your dreams as you've supported mine, and to remind you every day of how deeply you are loved." As Reverend Hayes pronounced them husband and wife, and Zach leaned down to seal their vows with a kiss, Amelia felt a sense of homecoming more profound than any she had ever known. This was where she belonged in this community, with this man, building a future neither of them had imagined possible when their paths first crossed. The celebration afterward, held in the town square with the entire community invited, was a true Western affair, abundant food, lively music, and dancing that continued well into the evening. Amelia found herself passed from partner to partner, as townsfolk claimed dances with the bride, each offering congratulations and welcome to the family they had formed in this remote corner of California. But it was the final dance of the evening that Amelia would always remember most vividly. As the fiddlers played a slow, sweet melody, Zach took her in his arms, their bodies moving in perfect harmony as they had since their first dance at the Harvest Festival. "Happy Mrs. Irwin," he murmured, the pride in his voice when he spoke her new name warming her heart. "More than I ever thought possible," she replied, resting her head briefly on his shoulder. "Thank you for waiting until I was ready, for understanding what I needed even when I didn't understand it myself." "We have all the time in the world now," Zach said, drawing her a little closer. "A lifetime to create memories together." As the music drew to a close, Amelia looked around at the gathering, her father and uncle deep in conversation near the refreshment table, her students playing tag between the dancing couples, the friends who had welcomed her so warmly into their community. Then she looked up at her husband, his face illuminated by the lanterns hung throughout the square, his eyes reflecting the same joy she felt in her own heart. "A lifetime," she agreed, standing on tiptoe to kiss him lightly. "Starting now." Hand in hand, they bid farewell to their guests and walked toward their new home, the house Zach had built for their future, where they would begin their life together. As they crossed the threshold, Amelia knew with absolute certainty that while she had indeed come west to forget, what she had found instead was far more valuable: the courage to remember without being consumed by grief, the strength to love again without fear, and a man who had given her countless new reasons to embrace each day with hope and gratitude. 5 years later, 1881, the sound of children's laughter floated through the open windows of the Irwin home as Amelia finished setting the table for dinner. From the back porch came Zach's deep voice, patiently explaining something to their son, 4-year-old Benjamin, named for the uncle who had brought Amelia to Yreka and into Zach's life. "Mama, Papa's showing me how to whittle," Benjamin called out excitedly. "Come see." Wiping her hands on her apron, Amelia stepped onto the porch, her heart full at the sight of her husband and son sitting side by side on the steps, a small piece of wood in Benjamin's hands and a look of intense concentration on his face. At 4, he was already showing Zach's mechanical aptitude and love of working with his hands. "Be careful with that knife," she cautioned, though she knew Zach would never allow their son to handle anything truly dangerous. "He's just holding the wood while I do the cutting," Zach assured her with a wink. "Got to start him young, though. A man should know how to use a knife properly." Amelia shook her head fondly. "Just like a man should know how to ride before he can walk, according to you." "Exactly," Zach agreed without a hint of apology. "And our Benjamin's already showing promise in that department. Aren't you, son?" Benjamin nodded eagerly. "Penny let me brush her all by myself yesterday, and Papa says soon I can have my own pony. Did he now?" Amelia raised an eyebrow at her husband, who had the grace to look slightly abashed. "We'll discuss that later, I think." For now, both of you need to wash up for dinner, and someone needs to fetch Elizabeth from Mrs. Chen's, where she's probably being spoiled beyond redemption." "I'll go," Zach offered, standing and ruffling Benjamin's dark hair, so like his own. "Come on, Ben. Let's go rescue your sister from Mrs. Chen's almond cookies before she turns into one." As they disappeared around the side of the house toward the small cottage where Mrs. Chen now lived, having retired from Uncle Benjamin's service, but still very much a part of their extended family, Amelia took a moment to savor the peaceful scene. Their home, originally built with just the two of them in mind, had expanded over the past 5 years to accommodate their growing family. A nursery had been added for Benjamin's arrival, then converted to a bedroom for him when Elizabeth was born 2 years later. The livery stable had prospered as well, with Zach's reputation for quality horses spreading throughout Northern California and Southern Oregon. He now employed 3 full-time workers, allowing him to spend more time with his family while still maintaining the hands-on approach that had built his business. Amelia had continued teaching until Benjamin's birth, then made the difficult but fulfilling decision to focus on her family for a few years. She still maintained close connections with the school, serving on the board and occasionally substituting when needed. Just last month, she had begun discussions about returning to teaching part-time now that Elizabeth was becoming more independent. The sound of footsteps and childish giggles announced the return of her family. Elizabeth, a sturdy 2-year-old with Amelia's auburn hair and Zach's storm-gray eyes, rode triumphantly on her father's shoulders, clutching one of Mrs. Chen's cookies in her small fist. "Mama," she called out, waving the cookie like a trophy. "Cookie." "I see that," Amelia laughed, reaching up to take her daughter. "And right before dinner, too. What am I going to do with all of you? Love us exactly as we are," Zach suggested, stealing a quick kiss as he handed Elizabeth over. "Incorrigible though we may be." "I suppose I have no choice," Amelia replied, her mock resignation belied by the love shining in her eyes. Dinner was the cheerful, slightly chaotic affair that family meals with young children inevitably are. Benjamin chattering about his day at the livery with Papa, Elizabeth attempting to feed her peas to the cat under the table, Zach and Amelia exchanging glances that contained entire conversations, developed over years of partnership and shared understanding. As Amelia tucked the children into bed later that evening, reading them a story about a brave knight and a clever princess, she felt the familiar wave of gratitude that often overtook her in these quiet moments. Her life had taken a path she could never have imagined in those dark days after Edward's death, when the future had seemed an empty, desolate landscape. Downstairs, she found Zach in his favorite chair on the porch, watching the stars emerge in the deepening twilight. She settled beside him, and he automatically reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining with the easy familiarity of long habit. "Good day," he asked, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "The best kind," she replied. "Busy, a little messy, and filled with the people I love most." She hesitated, then added, "I had a letter from Papa today. He's planning to visit in August, and he's bringing Aunt Margaret with him." Zach smiled. "That's wonderful news. The children will be excited to see their grandfather, and it's about time we met this aunt of yours who's been writing him such interesting letters." Amelia laughed softly. "Papa insists they're just old friends, but I have my suspicions. He mentions her in every letter now." "Well, if anyone deserves a second chance at happiness, it's your father," Zach said, his expression thoughtful. "After losing your mother so young and then supporting you through your loss of Edward, it would be fitting for him to find companionship in his later years." Amelia leaned her head against his shoulder, struck once again by her husband's innate understanding of human hearts. "You always see to the heart of things, don't you?" "Not always," he admitted with a self-deprecating smile. "Just often enough to keep you thinking I'm wiser than I really am." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars and listening to the night sounds of their small corner of the world. Finally, Amelia spoke again, her voice soft with memory. "You remember what you said to me the day I first visited your livery?" "About the West being a good place to heal," Zach nodded, his arm tightening around her. "I remember everything about those early days with you, Amelia. Every conversation, every ride, every moment when I saw you beginning to open your heart again." "You were right," she said simply. "It wasn't just the West, though. It was you, your patience, your understanding, your willingness to wait until I was ready." She turned to face him, her eyes reflecting the starlight. "I came west to forget, but you gave me something far more valuable, the courage to remember without pain, and the chance to build a life filled with new memories, new joys." Zach's kiss was gentle, a reaffirmation of the bond that had grown between them over the years, a bond forged in shared understanding of loss and the precious gift of finding love again. "I thank God every day that you stepped off that stage, Coach," he murmured against her hair. "That you were brave enough to journey into the unknown, and that somehow our paths crossed in this little corner of the world." As they sat together in the gathering darkness, the house behind them sheltering their sleeping children, the future stretching before them bright with promise, Amelia reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment of perfect contentment. The grief that had once threatened to define her life had been transformed, not erased but woven into the fabric of who she had become: a teacher, a wife, a mother, a woman who had learned that hearts, like the land around them, could heal and flourish even after the harshest seasons. She had indeed come west to forget. But what she had found instead was the courage to remember, to cherish the past without being trapped by it, to embrace the present with all its joys and challenges, and to face the future with hope and an open heart. And through it all, the steady, unwavering love of a cowboy with storm-gray eyes had given her countless new reasons to remember, to celebrate, and to believe that sometimes the bravest journey of all is the one that leads us home to where we truly belong.